My parents disowned me for marrying outside our culture. 20 years later, they called because they need my kidney to save mom's life. I, 38 am, still remember the day my parents told me never to come back. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. No screaming, no broken dishes. Just my father's cold voice saying, "You have made your choice. We are no longer your family." My mother stood beside him, eyes downcast, silent tears streaming down her face. I had committed the unforgivable sin in their eyes, falling in love with someone outside our culture. That was 20 years ago. I was 18, young and naive, convinced love would conquer all. I married my high school sweetheart despite my parents' ultimatum. My new wife and I struggled initially. No family support, barely out of our teens, working minimum wage jobs while trying to finish college. But we made it work. We had to. Over the years, I sent letters, pictures of our children, wedding anniversary cards. They were all returned unopened. I called on holidays only to be hung up on. After 5 years, I stopped trying. The rejection was too painful, and I had my own family to focus on now. Life moved on. I finished my degree, found a good job in tech, and we raised 2 amazing kids. My wife's family became mine. They weren't perfect, but they welcomed me, celebrated our milestones, and supported us through rough patches. I built a life without my parents, filling the void with new connections and experiences. Then, 3 days ago, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Son." The voice was older, friendlier, but unmistakable. My father. My heart froze. 20 years of silence. And now this single word carried the weight of mountains. "We need to talk to you," he continued when I didn't respond. "It's urgent. Your mother is sick." After that call, I sat in my car for an hour, unable to drive, unable to think straight. My wife found me there, staring blankly at the garage wall. She didn't say anything, just took my hand and sat with me until I could speak. "They need a kidney." I finally told her that night after the kids were asleep. "Mom has end-stage renal disease. They've tried everything else. Dad and my sister aren't matches." My wife's face showed the concern I expected, but also something else, wariness. She knew our history better than anyone. "What are you thinking?" she asked carefully. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to help. She's still my mother. Another part feels like they only reached out because they need something from me." 20 years of silence, and this is what brings them back. "You don't owe them anything," she reminded me gently. "Not after how they treated us." "I know," I said. "But if I don't help and she dies, could I live with that?" The house looked smaller than I remembered. The garden, once my mother's pride, was overgrown and neglected. I stood at the door, frozen between knocking and running away. Eventually, I forced myself to press the doorbell. My father answered. He had aged dramatically, hair completely gray, shoulders stooped, face lined with worry. For a moment, we just stared at each other, 2 strangers connected by blood, but separated by choices made long ago. "Thank you for coming," he said finally, his voice lacking the authority I remembered. He stepped aside to let me in. The interior was like a time capsule. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, though none of me after age 18, I noticed. The smell of my mother's cooking hung in the air, triggering memories I thought I'd buried. My sister was there too, looking uncomfortable. She'd been 15 when I left, and now stood before me as a middle-aged woman. We exchanged awkward nods. She had chosen to follow our parents' wishes, cutting me out of her life as well. I couldn't blame her. She'd been young and dependent on them. My mother sat in a recliner in the living room, thin and pale. She looked up when I entered, and her eyes filled with tears. "My son," she whispered in our native language. "You came." I stood there, frozen, as 20 years of anger, hurt, and longing crashed over me like a wave. "The doctors say I need a transplant," my mother explained weakly after we'd settled into uncomfortable silence. "Your father and sister were tested, but they aren't compatible." I nodded. This much I already knew from my father's call. "We've been on the waiting list for over a year," my father added. "But your mother's condition is deteriorating quickly." I looked around at these people who had once been my whole world. 20 years, I said quietly. 20 years without a word. No interest in meeting your grandchildren. No acknowledgement of my existence. And now you need my kidney. My father looked away. My sister studied her hands. Only my mother held my gaze. "We were wrong," she said simply. "I was wrong to let your father make that decision for our family. To choose our community's approval over our son." My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict her. "I'm not here to say yes or no yet," I told them. "I need to understand what this means. If I'm a match and I donate, what happens after? Do we go back to being strangers? Or are you actually wanting me back in your lives?" The silence that followed was deafening. I left their house with more questions than answers. They had given me medical paperwork about the testing process and transplant procedure. My father awkwardly offered to cover any expenses and lost wages. It all felt so transactional. That night, I told my wife everything. "I don't think they've really changed," I admitted. "They need something only I can provide, and they're willing to temporarily put aside their disapproval to get it." "What will you do?" she asked. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. "Get tested. See if I'm even a match. And use that time to decide what I really want from this situation." Update 1. The initial testing showed I was potentially compatible. Further tests were needed to confirm, which meant spending more time with my family, if I could still call them that. During one visit, I brought photos of my children. My mother's hands trembled as she held them. "They have your eyes," she whispered. "They've asked about you over the years," I said. "I told them you lived far away." "A convenient lie," my father remarked from his corner of the room. "More convenient than telling them their grandparents rejected their father for who he loved? That they didn't care enough to even send a birthday card?" I shot back. The room fell silent again. Before I left, my sister walked me to my car. "I tried to reach out to you once," she admitted. "About 10 years ago. I found your email through a mutual friend. I never got anything," I said, confused. "I wrote it, but never sent it." She looked away. "I was getting married. I wanted you there. But father said he wouldn't come if you did, and mother was too afraid to stand up to him. And you chose them," I said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. She nodded. "I chose wrong." That night, I dug through old boxes in our basement and found what I was looking for, the letters I'd sent over the years that had been returned unopened. I spread them on the kitchen table after everyone else was asleep. Birthday cards for my parents. Photos of our wedding. The birth announcements for both kids. 20 years of rejected attempts at reconciliation. I wondered what would have happened if my mother hadn't gotten sick. Would they have gone to their graves without ever speaking to me again? The thought made my chest tight. My wife found me there at 3 a.m., surrounded by these artifacts of rejection. "Maybe this is a chance," she said softly. "Not for them. For you. To find peace with this one way or another." Update 2. The final test results confirmed I was a compatible donor. The doctors explained the procedure, recovery time, and potential risks. It was a major surgery with significant recovery time. I need to take several weeks off work. I arranged a meeting with my parents and sister, this time bringing my wife. They seemed surprised when we both walked in, my father's expression tightening when I took her hand. "I'm a match," I said without preamble. "But before I agree to this, we need to establish some ground rules about what happens after." My father started to speak, but my mother raised her hand to stop him. "Let him talk," she said firmly. It was the first time I'd ever seen her contradict him. "If I do this," I continued, "it's not a transaction. I'm not trading a kidney for temporary acceptance. Either you're prepared to be part of our lives, all of our lives, including my wife and children, or this ends here." My wife squeezed my hand in support as I laid out my conditions. Acknowledgement of the hurt they'd caused, respect for my family, and genuine effort to build a relationship moving forward. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, my father spoke. "You don't understand what we sacrificed coming to this country," he said, his voice strained. "Our traditions were all we had left. When you rejected them." "I didn't reject anything," I interrupted. "I fell in love. That's all. With someone who didn't understand our ways, our values," he insisted. My wife, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. "I may not have been born into your culture," she said calmly, "but I would have learned. I tried to learn. You never gave me the chance." Another silence fell. My sister was the one to break it this time. "I have news too," she said quietly. "I'm getting divorced. My husband." She paused. "He wasn't who I thought he was." Despite being from the right background, my father looked stricken. 2 children who had defied expectations in different ways. "I'll think about what you've said," he finally offered. It wasn't acceptance, but it was more than I'd gotten in 20 years. Update 3. The day before the scheduled surgery, my father asked to speak with me alone. We walked through the hospital garden, an awkward silence between us. "I was raised to believe that maintaining our traditions was everything," he finally said. "That without them, we would lose ourselves in this new country." I nodded but said nothing. "When you chose to marry outside our culture, I saw it as a rejection of everything I had tried to give you." He stopped walking and turned to face me. I was wrong. The words hung in the air between us. I had waited 2 decades to hear anything close to this. "Your mother showed me the letters you sent. The ones I made her return unopened." His voice cracked. "I saw my grandchildren growing up in photographs. All the moments I missed because of my pride. It hurt," I admitted. "For years, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't worthy of being loved by my own parents." "There was nothing wrong with you," he said, his eyes wet. "The fault was mine. My fear of change. My inability to see that our culture could grow and evolve without being lost. It wasn't everything, but it was a start." The surgery went smoothly. I woke up groggy and in pain, but with my wife by my side. Later that day, I learned the transplant had been successful. My kidney was functioning in my mother's body. Recovery was difficult. Physical pain mixed with emotional exhaustion as 20 years of complex feelings surfaced. My parents visited my hospital room awkwardly, unsure of their place. My father brought traditional food my wife had always wanted to learn how to make. A week after the surgery, my children met their grandparents for the first time. My daughter, ever direct, asked them, "Why haven't we met you before?" The room grew tense. I waited to see how my parents would respond to this innocent but loaded question. My mother took my daughter's hand. "Because we made a very big mistake," she said simply. "One we hope to fix, if you'll let us." It's been 3 months since the surgery. My mother's health has improved dramatically. My relationship with my family remains complicated, 2 decades of estrangement can't be erased by a single act, no matter how significant. We're taking small steps. My mother is teaching my wife to cook traditional dishes. My father still struggles, but is trying in his way. My sister brings her children over to play with mine. We're building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. I don't know if we'll ever fully heal. Some wounds leave permanent scars. But there's something powerful in the knowledge that when they needed something only I could provide, I chose compassion over resentment. Not because they deserved it, but because it allowed me to become the person I wanted to be. Someone who doesn't perpetuate cycles of hurt and rejection. My wife asked me recently if I regretted my decision. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I told her honestly. Not because they earned it, but because it freed me. For 20 years, they held power over me through their rejection. By choosing to help despite that history, I took that power back. We're not a perfect family. We may never be. But we're talking, and after 20 years of silence, that feels like enough for now.